Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Joseph. Today's video we're going to be doing a retouching of one of these images that I shot. If you haven't seen the behind the scenes, then I will recommend that you check the card right here. I'm going to leave that there. You can click it and watch the behind the scenes on how I got these images. But I have narrowed them down, and there is this particular one that I want to retouch for today's video. So basically you will see what I do from beginning to end, how I process my raw files in Capture One and all the things that I do in Photoshop. First of all, if the Capture One interface is new to you, I just want to show you that you can customize this to things that you think that you will be using on a regular basis. So me, for example, I have created a quick tab, and in the quick tab I have my histogram, base characteristics, layers, white balance, high dynamic range, curve, levels, exposure, and I've also arranged them in basically like an order or like in a series of steps that I take when I'm post-processing here inside Capture One. And if you don't have the quick tab, all you do is just double click or right click on the toolbar, and then when you come down you see there's this layer called Add Tool tab, and over there currently the quick is disabled because I have already enabled it. And when you enable that, it comes with some tools, but you still can add tools. You can remove tools. This is fully customizable. So if you want to add a tool, for example, you just right click again and it says add tool. So over here you can choose whatever tool that you want. I already have them imported and arranged in a way that I want. So if you want to rearrange this, you can simply click and then drag, and then you can stack them in ways that you want. So I decided to bring my histogram first, then base characteristics, and then my layers, white balance, high dynamic range. From there I go to curves, levels, exposure, color balance, color editor, film grain. I don't use styles and presets, but it's there just in case I want to have that available to me quickly. With that said, what I'm going to start off with is my base characteristics. Generally I like to change it from generic to pro standard, and that just takes away some of the redness in the image. But for this particular shot, I think I like the way the red is present in the image. It looks really good. So I'm just gonna keep it on generic, and that's basically what I'm going to do inside my base characteristics. But just in case you also want to explore more with this, you can even go down to show all, and we'll show you like a series of profiles that you can play with. So for example, if I want to turn this into a DNG file neutral, by clicking on the show more, it brings up all of these. So Adobe, Canon, Epson, all that, and then I can go into Adobe DNG file neutral, and you can see it just sucks away all of the color. If I know the camera I shot this with, so if I go down into Canon, I can come down and then look for, actually go up, and you see Canon EOS R5, you have generic, and then you have pro standard. If I want to change this to like a 5D Mark IV profile, there's also generic, and then there's also pro standard. But I didn't shoot this with a 5D Mark IV, so I'm just going to stick with the R5 generic. So from there, I'm just going to go down into layers, and this is where I can create different layers and have different effects on them. So Capture One works a little bit close to Photoshop, even though Photoshop's engine is entirely different. There are certain things that are quite similar. So for example, if I want to make certain adjustments onto the background, I can do that here, and I can also create several layers. Here they're called adjustment layers, because the moment you create an adjustment layer, you have certain abilities to do. So for example, if I go into color balance, right, I can just decide to change this, and you can see that nothing is currently happening because this adjustment layer doesn't have a fill on it. So currently it's transparent, so whatever effect I am applying is not going to be visible. So if I just right click on this and then go to fill mask, you'd see immediately the color balance that I added is present. So let me just right click again and then clear mask. What you can also do here inside Capture One is you can draw masks in certain areas that you want. So if I make this brush bigger, for example, remember the effect is still there. If you go into shadow, you can see I have dragged it and then also made the midtones a bit orange. Now when I start painting over here, you can see this is currently showing me the area that I'm painting, and it is applying that effect. So when you start brushing, you will see this red mask. It is just a guide showing you where you're covering or where you're filling up, and the moment you let go, now you begin to see the effect. So if I go back again and now change, you'd see that because I'm making adjustments inside here, it is beginning to affect the area that I painted. You can also erase. So if you don't want a mask, or if you don't want an adjustment that you made on a particular layer to be visible, you can get rid of it by pressing E and now just erasing it. So once I erase it from the face, you notice that the effect is only around the chest area. So that's how the adjustment layer work, and you can create several adjustment layers. As you can see, as I am clicking, we are creating more adjustment layers. So let me just select these adjustment layers and then quickly trash them. So select it, highlight it, press the minus sign, and it will delete it. Press the minus sign, press the minus sign, and now we are back onto our background layer. All right, so for this particular image and what I want to do, I already have chosen my base characteristics and I left it at the default, which was the generic. Now I'm going to go into white balance. So all the adjustments I want to make currently, I just want to do them on the background layer. So I have that selected, and now I can go into white balance and I can start making adjustments from here. Currently it's set to as shot, but you can go to auto, you can go to daylight, but generally when I'm shooting with a constant Kelvin, I like to keep it as 5000. So you can also customize the white balance adjustments. So I just move the Kelvin. I can also move the tint with a slider. You don't necessarily have to type in the figures all the time. You can also just manually move the slider till you find a color that works for you. So I'm just going to keep it at -2 and just add a bit of warmth again. So actually instead of 5000, let me keep it as 5250, just so I can preserve a bit of the natural look and a bit of warmth in there as well. So this is basically what I would do with the white balance. Now I can decide to go into high dynamic range, and so I'm just going to bring that down a tiny bit. And also with the shadows, I can decide to darken them down even more, or I can just raise it up and it begins to reveal a lot. But obviously this is going way overboard, so I'm just going to bring that down. Also, if you move your slider and you want to quickly reset it, you can just double click on that node and it's just going to reset back to 0. Alright, so I'm just going to actually darken the shadows a little bit and also darken the whites just a little bit. I'm also going to make the blacks a little darker, somewhere like that. If you want to do a quick before and after of a particular adjustment, just press Alt, and then when you put the mouse on this reset icon, whilst you have down pressed Alt or Option on a Mac, when you click, it's going to show you the before, the adjustments, and when you let go, you'd see the after. So before and after, and this is a selective before and after, because all you're doing the before and after for is just that particular adjustment. So if I go onto the white balance, for example, press and hold Alt or Option, now you can see that it's just showing me the before and after of the white balance adjustment that I made. Alright, so I think this is okay for the high dynamic range. I'm going to go down into levels, and what I want to do is just bring in the highlights just a little bit. So I want to increase the contrast in the image. I'm going to move the midtones, just darken that a little bit, and then I'm also going to darken the shadows just a tiny bit more. So something like that. Now you can see it is making the image look very contrasty, and I really like it. So I'm going to hit Alt again, keep my finger pressed on Alt, and here's before, after, before, after. You can see it's added more depth to the image, and I really like it. At this point, I don't think I'll do anything in the curves. I don't think I'll also do anything in the exposure, but you can actually just add contrast if you want. You can increase exposure if you want, but again, I'm not going to be doing that for this particular image. Now we're inside color balance, so here you can make some color adjustments if you want to at this point before you go into Photoshop and then do your retouching. So what I want to do actually is change or maybe play with the color of the towel. I want to show you that you can have that flexibility to do that inside Capture One fairly easily. So I'm going to go into color editor, and in this tab we have the basic, we have the advanced, and then we have skin tone. So with the basic, you can actually now select a picker, and when you click on that and click on any color in the image, it will find one of these preset colors that are very close to it. And now when I change the hue, you will see that it did a very good job at selecting that particular color. And now that I'm changing the colors, you can see that we have that flexibility, but you don't have as many options as you would in the advanced tab. So let me just reset this and go back into advanced, and now you can see that we have the same picker icon right here, but now we have more adjustments as we have smoothness, we have hue, we have saturation, and then we have lightness. Basically the smoothness is more like feathering. So let me just quickly do that. We didn't have that option under the basic tab. We couldn't, adjust the feathering of that particular selection that it made. We only had access to the hue, saturation, and lightness, which are present over here, but now we have an additional smoothness, and we also have an HSL gone down here. So the moment I click on a color, you'd notice that it selected it in the color wheel, and we also have that down here. So I can now choose to move the hue around just like we were able to do under the basic tab, and we can also play with the saturation as well, and we can play with the lightness. So you have all of these to you, but then you can create a lot more of these color selections, and then it will create it automatically. So selecting the icon again, I can click on her skin, for example, and you can see it's sampled a brown tone. You can also adjust the selection area if you want. You can fine tune it here. You can even just drag this around, and it's also going to be changing. As you can see down here, we are moving this around, so it's going to be selecting any color within that. All right. Okay, so I'm just quickly going to reset this, and now we can go into skin tone. So inside skin tone, you have even more adjustments, and over here, even though it's called skin tone, it's not limited to just refining the skin tone. You can use this to refine any color that is present in your image. All right, so what I want to do is actually stick with advanced, or let me just show you briefly how skin tone works. So if I want to unify her skin tone, for example, maybe the variations are a lot. This happens when your makeup doesn't match the person's skin tone, but in this case, you can see if I zoom in, her face and her neck and the rest of the body actually have very similar skin tones. And I don't want to do so much post-processing. I really want to keep this looking as natural as possible, so we aren't going to do that. But I want to show you that you have that flexibility, you have that option as well. So let's say I like the color right here. I'm going to click on that, and it will automatically sample that for me. Again, you have those adjustments, so you can drag this wheel around, you can play with the contrast, you can play with the smoothness or the feathering of that color. And when you come down, you have the same HSL, that is the hue, saturation, and lightness available to you, but you have one more step, which is the uniformity. So this is what is going to unify the tones. You can also unify the saturation, and you can unify the lightness. So if I just click on this view selected color range, it's going to desaturate or any other color that isn't selected. So when I click on that, you can see that the towel has gone gray, and we have some gray patches in the backdrop, meaning that the skin tone and the backdrop have very similar colors. All right, so now I can decide to move this down a little bit, and you can see that it is beginning to desaturate the background as well. If I move this all the way, you can see that now we're losing color, and rather we are beginning to select the towel. So if initially I had sampled the towel, for example, it means that, actually let me just click there and see. So selecting that, you can see that we have the towel being selected, and everywhere else is gone gray, meaning that if I'm making any adjustments to the hue, to the saturation, it is only going to be affecting the towel and not the rest of our subject. So let me just undo that, and just for doing sake, let me sample a color that I like, and let me just make it a tiny bit uniform. Do the same thing to the saturation, and then also up the lightness a little bit. I'm also just going to move the hue ever so slightly to the left, just to add a bit more redness to it, and I'm also just going to desaturate it just a tiny bit. So again, I'm just gonna hit Alt and then do a before and after. Before, after. You can see that we have taken a little bit of the punch out of the skin tone. I think I'm just going to increase the saturation a little bit so it doesn't desaturate it as much. Alright, so moving on from the color editor, what I'm going to do now is just play with the color balance. So over here you have a three-way, actually you have a master. Let me start with the master. So the master is going to give you like an overall color adjustment. So you can move this dial around, play till you find, you know, like a general color area that you think you will settle with. But this affects the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. You don't have so much control. It's also affecting all the colors that are present in the image. So double click is going to reset, and if you go into three-way, it displays the shadow, the midtones, and the highlights all at the same time, and you can make the adjustments from here. But what I like to do is just work on them individually, because I have, you know, the icon bigger and I can be more precise this way. So inside the shadows, I want to, you know, maybe just cool it down a little bit. I don't want it to be too visible. I'm also going to desaturate the color. You can actually move these around, you know, and then you can either add more color or just less of it. And I just want a hint of that color in there. In the midtones, I want to add a bit of green, just like that. Increase the color intensity, and then we can also increase, you know, the contrast of that as well. I think I'm gonna move a bit towards the warm side. Yeah, I think I like this. And inside the highlights, let's just see what color would work. You can also click on this icon and then just move that around. Alright, so now that we have been able to do these little adjustments inside Capture One, I'm actually going to open this inside Photoshop. So right click, come down to Edit With, and I'm going to click on Photoshop 2021. It's going to open as a TIFF file, uncompressed, Adobe RGB for the ICC profile. Scale is fixed, resolution 300, everything is being kept the same, and I'm going to click on Edit Variants. I don't know why Photoshop is making these suggestions to me. Anyway, so now that we have opened the image inside Photoshop, now we're going to do skin work, and then we can do, you know, a final crop to, you know, get the image to where we want it to be. So the first thing I want to do inside Photoshop is heal any blemishes, any temporary things that are not, you know, a part of the model. Some things like, you know, this loose strand over here, we're just going to get rid of all of those things, and we're going to do that on a blank layer. So I'm going to come down here and click on the new layer icon. This is where I'm going to do all of my blemish removal. All right, so I'm going to hit J for my blemish removal tool, and just going to press Alt, sample a good area, and paint over the blemish. And as you can see, if I zoom in a little bit, here's before, after. It's done a very good job. All right, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, hit J again for my healing brush tool, and now I can just go over the entire image and then just paint over the blemishes or the things that I want to get rid of right now. Our subject has very good skin, so I wouldn't really do a lot of retouching, but hopefully this video is giving you some kind of value, and if it is, you can leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, but then leaving a like and a comment will let me know that you're enjoying these kind of videos, and I can be making a lot more of them. Alright, so I'm just going to zoom in here and just get rid of this quickly. Now I'm using the clone stamp tool. I pressed S for the clone stamp tool. I just want to use that to, you know, completely remove these. Alright, so I'm going back to my healing brush, and now I'm just going to paint, you know, sample and paint and get rid of anything that is bugging me at this point. Again, we're not going to be doing too much, just getting rid of what immediately stands out to me, because I want this image to look as natural as possible. So you can see I'm panning around. So when I'm zoomed in and I want to pan around, I just click on the space bar and it turns the icon into a hand icon, and you can click and then drag the image around. This helps me move quickly, you know, and then also work a lot faster. Over here, I'm using the clone stamp tool because I want to do direct copies of texture and then replace them. All right, just gonna go over here as well. Now I'm back on my healing brush tool. So that is it. Like when I'm retouching, that is what I do. I mostly go between the healing brush and the clone stamp tool, And so far you see that when I want to make direct copies or changes, that is when I use the clone stamp tool. But if I want Photoshop to do its magic, you know, sample colors and textures and replace them perfectly, then I use the healing brush tool for that. All right, I think I'm going to leave this area as it is. Again, I don't want to do too much. And already she has very good skin, so we really wouldn't do so much to this image anyway. Now that I'm done with all of the healing I want to do, what I'm going to do now is just go into my actions. So if you don't have my actions, this will be a good time to check my digital store out. I'll put a link in the description box. You can click on there, go onto my digital store. I have a ton of products that you guys can purchase. For example, my retouching workflow pack for those who want more control when they're retouching and they want to pick and choose every single action that they want to run. But the good thing is these actions work simultaneously. They work together. You can run all of them at the same time and they will work. All right, so now that I've done my healing, I'm just going to rename this layer to healing. And now I'm going to run my frequency separation action. So I'm going to select the 16-bit, press play. And now I need to choose a radius. All right, so something like this I think is cool. We'll just bring it down a little bit and press OK. Now I'm going to go into the frequency separation and open the group folder. In there you'd see I have texture, I have blank, I have blur copy, and I have blur. I'm also going to turn on the frequency separation helper layer. What this is doing is just sucking away all of the color, leaving me with just a black and white image. And with this, it helps me see, you know, like the tonal variations, the inconsistencies properly, and I'm not being distracted by color. So what I'll do is just zoom in a little bit, and now you can see that there is a ton of imperfections or tonal variations, and that is what we're going to be doing with our frequency separation. So I'm going to click on the blur copy, hit B for my brush tool, and I'm going to click and drag and come down onto the mixer brush. So this is what I'm going to be using. In case you don't see what this is doing, when I zoom in a little bit and do it before and after, you can see that we have been able to blend those variations perfectly. So I'm just going to be running through the image looking for areas that need to be blended in. And the way I run my frequency separation, or the way I do my retouching for tonal variations, is I do a mix and match of frequency separation. So even though currently the layer is set to 100%, I am not going to leave the entire group to 100% when I am done. When I'm done, I will reduce the opacity, and then I'll go into dodge and burn, and I'm also going to use dodge and burn to further smoothing the tonal variations. I'm not aiming to do 100% of the work with frequency separation, because sometimes, or I have noticed that when you use frequency separation, you tend to go overboard. So for me, this is something that I have put in as a check so that I don't go overboard ever with my frequency separation. I know there are also like other actions out there that just limit the frequency separation to a color view, but for me, I found that if I work this way, it makes me pick and choose the areas that I need to smooth in easily, rather than being distracted by color and thinking that you need to smooth in certain areas that, you know, don't really need your attention. So by doing this, not only am I more precise, but I'm also more efficient, because I'm picking and choosing the areas that need smoothing. So again, if I do it before and after, now you see that we are making a ton of changes. So that's the thing with frequency separation, or even retouching in general. You're always making little changes that come together, or that become a collective of changes, and then you can see the impact that you're having. Sometimes as you're painting, you think that nothing is happening, you keep on painting, and then you will stand the chance of going overboard. So as much as possible, even if you're adding strokes and you're not really seeing anything, I will highly recommend that you do it before and after, and there's a chance, or there's a high chance, that you will see that you have made some adjustment, but because your eye hadn't adjusted to it, you were not immediately seeing those changes. But because I've been doing this for quite a while, or quite a bit now, I'm able to tell that I am making some adjustment. Right, I'm going to scroll all the way down here, and I'm just going to smoothing this area as well. this area looks darker than the top because, you know, if you saw the behind the scenes, I used one light for this and I didn't have any reflector underneath to bounce some of that light back. So because of the light fall off, the size of the modifier, there was a rapid fall off, and that is why this area has gone darker than the top. But I mean, we can actually keep it. I think I like it because it's adding more drama to the image, and you know, it's not really distracting and it's not that bad. Now that I'm done with my frequency separation, I'm just going to go onto the helper layer and I'm going to delete it. And now when I zoom in and do a before and after, you can see that we have made some changes. So now I'm just going to bring the opacity down to, let's say, about 63%. Before, after, you can see that the adjustments are still there, they just aren't as strong. All right, I'm just going to go back. I think I missed the armpit area, so I'm just going to paint in there just to smoothen that as well. And that's a good thing with working with layers inside Photoshop. You can always come back and then make adjustments later on, you know. And also save your work. As you're working, always save. I know Photoshop has become a lot safer to work with nowadays. It doesn't crash a lot or even at all, but it's still a good practice to be saving your work as you're working. Alright, now that I'm done with frequency separation, I'm going to go back into my action set and I'm going to click on dodge and bend complete and press play. So this is going to create all the dodge and bend layers that I need. If I open up the group, you see that we have contrast, we have desat, and we have burn and dodge. So the contrast and the desat is just basically doing what frequency separation, what the helper layer did, but currently it's all combined because it is a good practice to dodge and burn using a black and white representation so that you can see again the tonal variations that you are targeting and then work on them and be more efficient that way. So I'll turn on the desat. You can see that it is not really showing so much of the variations, and so I added a contrast layer, and over here it makes that contrast or the variations pop out more, and I can be more targeted and more focused on the areas that I need to fix. I'm going to start off with this with a face. So zooming in, this time I'm not going to be using a mixer brush. I'm going to be using a regular brush, and I want the flow to be really low, somewhere between 1 and 3%. So let's do 2 actually. And now I can also make sure that my foreground is set to white, and now I can start painting, and that should start helping me, you know, reduce any variations. So here's a before and here's after. You can see that the forehead is now beginning to look smooth. We are getting a better transition from, you know, light to dark. Alright, so zooming out, now we can do a complete before and after of the dodge and bend. So here's before, here's after, before, after. You can see that we have enhanced the image. It looks really good. Tonal transitions are smooth. Everything is working very well. So let me just do a before and after from frequency separation. So this is where we started from. So when I add the frequency separation, you can see we're smoothing it a little bit, and then when we added the dodge and bend, it just fine-tuned everything and made it perfect. So before and after. I really like where we are currently in the image. So after we are done with this, now the next thing that is bugging me, to be honest, is going to be the reflection in here. You can see that, I mean, there were a lot of prints on there, but I just want to make it smoother, and I also want to actually make it dark. I want to darken the glass itself. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to use my pen tool to draw a selection around the area that I want to fill. So I'm going to quickly do that. So now that I have drawn the two parts around, I'm going to go into path and I'm just gonna hit command and then click, and you can see that it's turned the pen paths that I had initially drawn into selection. So I'll go back into layers, and now what I want to do is just fill it with black. So we're gonna press Alt, fill it with black, and when I zoom out, you can see that we have darkened that pretty easy, but it isn't looking as natural as I want it to be. So I'm going to bring the opacity down just a little bit like that. And now when I zoom in, I'm going to use my brush, a regular brush, and I'm just going to sample and then just try and blend everything in a little bit. So I'm going to increase my flow to about 24%, sample, create a new layer, sample, and then just paint. So I just want to fill this in manually like that. So now that we are done with these, the next thing I want to target is going to be some of the color cast in the shadow area, especially in the outfit she's wearing. I want it to be completely dark. So what I'll do is I'll hit hue saturation and I'll come and sample that color. You can see that it is saying that there are blues in the shadows, and if you remember, we did put some blues in our image back in Capture One, but now I don't want it to be present in the dress. I just wanted the blues to be present in her skin, not necessarily the outfit and the surroundings. So I'm just going to desaturate it all the way. You can see that it quickly takes the blue out of the shadows, right? And you can also even just darken it down some more if you want to do that. And I think I actually want to do that to somewhere here. That looks really good. Perfect. I'm just going to create a new curves layer, and what I want to do is just increase the brightness ever so slightly and also just darken down the shadows a little bit. What I'm doing here is just adding a bit more contrast to the image and also making the highlights a bit more specular. Now that I'm done setting that, I want to bring the opacity down just to about 70%. Here's a before and here's an after. You can see that it is adding a bit of glow onto the image, and I really like it. Now what I want to do next is just make sure that the skin tone is matching a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll create another hue adjustment, and I will select an area around here. You can see it's saying reds, and I will slide this all the way to the right to increase the saturation. Now what I want to do is find out if there are any areas that aren't really blending with the rest of the skin. You can easily do this inside Capture One, but I want to show you that you can do that in Photoshop as well, even though it takes a few more steps. Now that I've moved the saturation all the way to the right, I am going to now reduce the targeting area, right? The spread. So I'm just going to move this in as well. And this controls the feathering. We're just targeting or making the targeted area very narrow. And now when I click and drag, you can see that we are beginning to get rid of the selection in the background, and now we are getting into her skin. So somewhere around here, I could see that those areas had a little bit of yellow in them, and right now when you look up, you can see that it has selected yellows. I am going to bring my feathering just out a tiny bit, just so the transitions are a bit soft, and I will reduce the saturation back to 0. Now that I have done that, I can play with the hue itself. So moving the hue, you'd see that we can either make it green or we can make it pink, but what I want to do is just make sure the color matches the rest of the skin. So by bringing it down -13, it's just adding a bit of redness and making it match the rest of the skin a little bit. I'm also going to add a bit of saturation over there, and when we do it before and after, you can see that we have been able to, unify the skin, and this looks really good. Alright, at this point, I think I like the way the image looks. What I want to do is just add my global dodge and bend, which is going to add more shape to the image. So what I'll do is go back into my actions, and I'm going to go and select. I can actually run the dodge and bend complete, but what I want to do is run the dodge and bend individual layers. So I'm going to select the two of them and press play, and you can see that it has created a dodge and bend adjustment for me. So I'm going to start with dodge, hit B for my brush tool, make it a little bit bigger and reduce the flow from 24 to, let's say, about 7 or 8%, because I want it to be very visible. All right, I'm going to paint with white over these areas. Anywhere that there is an existing highlight, I want to go over that with this dodge brush. All right, so just go over there, go over this area just like that, go over her arm. Perfect. Even the towel as well. Any areas that are catching light, I just want to go over that with this brush. So here's a before, here's an after. It doesn't look good, but hold on, we will fix it very soon. I'm going to go into burn, and now I just want to burn this area down. Anywhere that there's shadow, I want to paint over that with my brush. So what I'm doing currently is global dodge and burn, and this is what I'm using to add more depth, more shape to our subject. And when I'm done, you will see that it's going to make her really pop off the backdrop, and that is what I'm looking for. So here's a before the burn, after the burn. So when I group these into a single group and call it let me just call it global dodge and burn. Alright, so when I do it before and after, you see that it is adding shape. She is popping off the background, but the effect is too strong. And this was deliberate because I know that I can bring my opacity down to about 50%. So here's before and here's after. And I can see that this is looking really good. She's popping off the background. Everything looks great. Alright, now what I want to do is see if I can play with color just a tiny bit, and I'm going to actually use selective color in this case. So over here, I will play with the reds just a little bit and see what I can do with the reds. Also going to magenta. I think maybe just add a bit of that. Going to the yellows. Actually just move it a little bit this way. And so maybe just add a bit of black to that. So here's the before and after of just the red adjustment. We'll go into yellows and we'll do the same thing. Just figure out which direction we want to go. I think to the right. Magenta. I think we want to add a bit of magenta to the skin. Also add a tiny bit of yellow. And maybe just reduce the blacks of the yellows. Now I'm going to go into neutrals, and let's see what we can do with the neutrals. Also move it a bit towards cyan. Add a bit of magenta. Yeah, maybe just take out a bit of yellow in the neutral areas. I will go into highlights now, and let's see what we can add into our highlights. These are very tiny adjustments, but they go a very long way. Yeah, I think I'll just keep it here. And here's a before and after. You can see that we have muted the colors a little bit. It is looking really good. I think I like it where it is. But what I want to do to finalize the image is run some of my melanin actions just to see what effect that they will create on this image. So I'm going to go and click on color lookup, and I've already loaded my actions in here. So I'm going to start with fade punch. Let's see what fade punch does. Okay, that's looking good. We can go into fairly muted. I'm keeping the adjustments in mind. Fire gold. Oh, I really like this color. Flamey. Flamey doesn't really work for this. Phloshop actually makes her skin really pop, but it's darkening it. Let me actually reduce the opacity. So before, after. It's working. Yeah, I think I actually like Fury more. So it's either Fury or Fire Gold. I think I'll stick with Fire Gold, but just drop the opacity. Actually, you know what? Let me mix them. I'll send this opacity down to about 37%, create a new color lookup, and then I am going to select Fury. And then bring Fury down also to 40%. So if I group the two of them, here's a before and here's an after. It is subtle, but I really like it. So let me group all of the adjustments we've made so far. And here's our before. So this is what we imported into Photoshop right after Capture One, and this is where we are now. This looks absolutely amazing. The last thing I want to do inside the adjustment group is go back into my actions, and then now I just want to add a bit of noise to the image. I'll just press play, and we're just going to add a bit of grain or noise to the image. So zooming in, before, there's a tiny bit of grain. I think it works. Actually increase the opacity because it's automatically set to 20%. So let me just make it 40%. Yeah, I really like what we've done. I love the image so much. Alright, so now that we are inside Capture One, I just want to quickly show you where we started from. So this is actually what we imported into Capture One. This is our raw file. This is where we started from. We made a few adjustments inside Capture One, and then we finalized the image inside Photoshop. I really like the way the image looks. So guys, I'll catch you guys in the next one.